So this is our first episode in a series called Rise Village to Capital. And the overall purpose of the video is to series is to show you the transformation from a village to a capital. If you remember that a capital doesn't kind of get built in a day, it starts from a small village and then builds its way up. So what I'll do is I want to go over the general overview and purpose of this series. And the way that I'll go about it is some slight lore. In the past, a war took place. War refugees fled the village or fled that nation, and then in the present they were able to find a location and establish a hamlet that will turn into a thriving village, which we'll do in today's episode. But in that future, that small village will grow and rise to become one of the most powerful nation states with a powerful capital. So that's the future that we have in hold. So there's going to be multiple episodes in the series. So there's a lot to look forward to. And we're going to set up this first episode into 4 sections. In the first section, we're going to cover the lore. It's a little bit of lore is helpful. Just having some bones is helpful for getting your village or your settlement started. Otherwise, you have to think about all this stuff as you're building. But if you have a little bit of lore, little nuggets of lore in the beginning, some bones, a skeleton to work with, it'll be much easier for you to put it together. Then we're going to go over the necessary resources to maintain a village. That's going to be super important. And when we figure out what those resources are, it will be easier to apply them to the terrain that we're going to be creating. So then we're going to create the terrain itself, all the different hills, cliffs, grass, the water, everything that we want. We're going to go ahead and build. You always build from the ground up first. This is how I always say it. You build the terrain, then you build the city, and you just build upward like you do in reality, right? It's hard to build a village or a city without the terrain first. And then lastly, we're going to make the village itself, and we're going to get to know the inhabitants of the village, what their occupations are, a little bit of their history, because it's always good to put a face to the people that live in that village. Once the village grows into a massive city and capital, it's harder to keep track of individual people like this. But when you're in the first stages of a hamlet to a village, you only have maybe a dozen or so inhabitants, allowing you to go more into depth and personal history of characters that live there. So this is kind of a helpful to get us started. And from all of that lore and the people that live there, we can start building episode upon episode as we go on this journey. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over the first part, which is going to be basically our lore. And the way that our lore works is pretty simple. Years ago, a terrible war tore through the kingdom of Dire. Cities burned, armies of fire mages marched endlessly, and the countryside became a battlefield. 4 families banded together to escape. These are going to be the founders of our hamlet / village. They're going to be playing an important role in how the village grows and thrives, the ideas that come, all of those things, and their experiences dealing with being refugees of war will play an impact or have an impact on how they decide to come up with ideas, religions, how they're going to view the community, politics, economics. So all of those things are going to be important. Once they were able to escape, or once they were able to band together, they built a makeshift riverboat from the scavenged lumber and tools that they could carry. With only a few supplies and their children aboard, they pushed off into the cold night and drifted away from the war. They traveled dozens of miles following the river through wilderness none of them had ever seen before. Eventually, they found a quiet bend in the water where the current slowed and the land opened into a fertile ground. So we have a little bit of lore that we can work with, and then as we go through our episodes, we'll build off of these bones. So let's go ahead and turn off our lore. Let's go into that next step. Whenever you're building a map, you need to have some certain resources that's going to be on your terrain, right? Like there needs to be things like the availability of water, food, timber for building, stone for also building if you want a wall or you want to create a well that goes down. If you want to create the foundations of a mill, you need stone, right? So there's some things that we want to add to our terrain, our checklist. Our water source will be the river, right? The water, it's fresh water. It can be filtered if necessary. It's going to be a major source of water, right? Two, with the food, because you have the availability of fresh water, you can go fishing and eat fish. You can also irrigate that river to create crops for your food. For timber, there needs to be a forest nearby. So we know we're going to add a forest, a river to our terrain, and there also needs to be stone. So we want to create maybe some rocks, maybe to create some kind of quarry, maybe a rocky outcropping will be helpful. All right, so these are the resources that are going to be necessary to continue on the map. So why don't we start with these resources in mind? Why don't we start with creating a water, and this will be easy. We're going to create the river part. And the way that I would go about doing this is pretty simple. We're going to go over to something called our terrain layer. You notice I've labeled it terrain, so that this way I have one layer where all of my terrain is at. And what I'll do first is I'm going to go ahead and take the land tool. That's this little shovel right here. And we're going to go fill, and it's going to fill this entire canvas with everything. Right here, it has a green color. It has a gray color. We're going to go ahead and fill land. Right here, we're going to go to fill. And here's going to be our land part. Then I'm also going to go over to my water brush layer, and I'm going to choose a watercolor for my river. Because this green is such a bright green, why don't we create contrast? Remember, I always talk about these iron rules of contrast, and we've already got something contrasting happen here. We have water versus land, but there's another contrast. How about the dark water texture contrasting against a lighter ground texture? So what we can do here is go back to our shovel, and we're going to go over to the subtract section here, and we're going to bring that brush up like this, and I'm going to go ahead and create a river bend. Noticed in my lore I said that there's a bend with a rocky outcropping. Let's go ahead and create that. So first I'm going to want to create the river part. It kind of goes like this, and in fact what I'll do is I think I will go ahead and use a different brush. Let's not use the edgy brush, let's use this brush here. And also I don't think I did the fill for the land, for the water, so let me fill real quick. There we go. Go to the subtract mode, and I'm going to create a bend. Let's go something different. Let's go like this, and then we can create kind of a circular kind of bend right here. I'll kind of just fill this out here. And what we'll end up doing is that as the map becomes bigger, as it thrives from a village to a town to a city to a capital, we'll continue to resize the map using the resize feature, and then we'll have it grow and build. So for now, here's our basic location right here. This part right here will make a nice terrain. In fact, what I might end up doing is undoing this real quick. Let me go to undo real quick. And let's actually create more land on the bottom part, and then we'll create less land on the top part. That way I can create some space and resizing won't be quite a pain. So I'll go ahead and go like this. Have the water go up this way nice and high, and then loop this way. I think that looks pretty good right there. So this way there's less land on the top. We might create resize and then have the village grow on the other side so that it has both sides of the river. But for now, it's just a village. Once you've kind of created that first contrast, the water and the land, why don't we start creating terrain features like cliffs, banks, hills, things like that. Remember, you build from the ground up. We'll start with the ground part, and then we'll add vegetation, foliage, things like that. So let's go into our catalog here. Let's choose a couple things for our line tool. I'm going to go into line tool here. I'm going to go over to free draw. I'm going to go to stamp. I'm going to go in here. Now, I personally do not care for the hills and these stamps. I much prefer to use the fantasy battle map hills. This is just a personal choice. You don't have to use these, but I feel these work a little bit better. This is just my opinion. If we type in hill in the catalog, you'll notice that there are two types, craggy hill and rocky hill. The craggy hill is great for minor elevation changes, like a slope, while this craggy hill might do better for slightly more rugged, like hill-like terrain. So we'll start with the craggy hill first to create a slope first. And what I'll do here is I'm going to use my pen. If you have a regular drawing pen for your tablet, that works well. and you can just use free draw, but if you have a mouse, you might want to consider using the pen instead, because this way you can go over here and just single click all along your edge here. And it's okay if some of your lines, if it's straight, the trick is don't have a lot of distance between these nodes here. To create more curvature, you use more nodes. So have your spacing be kind of not too far apart. Notice how when I get to the larger curves that the nodes become closer together. So just make sure that you do that. That's going to be step one. We're going to go all the way off screen. We're going to go to plus. Notice that the cliff is facing the wrong way. So why don't we flip that? You're always going to go flip stroke vertically. And there's a nice slope right there. There's step one. And what I'll want to do is maybe create a slope on the other side as well. So we'll have two slopes. So the river is kind of sloped on their banks. Let's go ahead and go like this. Let's do it again like this. I'm just going to single click. Now you can also do curves, by the way. If you click, hold, and drag, you can get curves if you want. But I feel that because this hill stroke has enough curves in its stroke that you don't actually have to use that if you don't want to. That's up to you. And what I'll do is I'll create that slope, go off this side like this. Just remember that one trick. The more nodes you have, the more curve you create. The less nodes, the less curve. That's super important when you're using it, okay? There we go. It looks like I'll also have to flip this back this way. There we go. That looks good. All right. Our first part, we're creating elevation. Remember that contrast I mentioned? Our first parts of elevation contrast are coming together. You have the slopes. These are the banks of the river. We also want to create some further elevation to create more contrast. Why don't we create a rocky outcropping? In the future, a rocky outcropping can be helpful for building maybe a castle in the future, quarrying stone to create your walls. Wherever that rocky outcropping is, we're going to put that right here on the bend right here to create some height. So why don't we do that? Let's go back here. We're going to go ahead and keep our pen and we're going to switch over to craggy hill, or the rocky hill right here. And then what I'll end up doing here is let's use the shape instead. And what's really helpful is when you switch from line to shape, whatever the last line you had selected will show up in the shape. So this will be helpful. So let's go ahead and use rocky hills. I'm going to go ahead and use my pen. I got my shape. And I'm going to, again, what I'm creating here is a rocky outcropping. So up along here, what I'm going to do is create this outcropping here. And this rocky outcropping is where the main village is going to be built. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. I'm going to follow my curves here like this. There we go. That looks good. Go to add. There we go. Now we have this nice rocky outcropping right here. I kind of want to change this up. Let's go change the nodes real quick. I'm going to go over to nodes. I'm going to select this node and kind of move it this way a little bit and push this one this way. There we go. I just want it to match a little bit better. There we go. So this creates a little bit more height. You notice that the rocky hill has some harder shadows built in. Those harder shadows are a big trick to depth, right? That when you have those shadows, it causes the stroke to pop out more, giving it this sense of height. So we already have this nice rocky outcropping here. This is where the village is going to be built. Why don't we also create some more elevation changes just to give it a little bit more life? Let's go back over to our hill segment here. Let's go push this down a layer. And then what I'll do is I'll create some hills, some slope, so that way there's a little bit extra slope at the bottom of this hill here. Oopsie, let's undo that to get some slope. Right about here looks good. Let me just go ahead and add that. There we go. Some extra slope there. Why don't we continue adding a little bit more slope along here to create just some more unique terrain differences here. That looks good. Okay, why don't we add in another one right here? Let's put in a little hill that kind of goes right here. Like, actually, no, let's leave that. Let's leave this space open for crops down here. I think this will be a good spot for crops down here. Let me just take a look overall and see how it looks. This looks good. Okay, why don't we take this rocky outcropping and just bring the scale down a little bit? There we go. A little bit smaller scale. Looks good. That looks all right. In fact, I kind of liked it better the way it was. Let's leave it like that. That looks good. Okay, all this terrain looks good. Just want to make sure that everything looks right. I think that looks okay. All right, once that terrain is done, I'll go ahead and just select everything, create group, and I'm going to call it cliffs. There we go. And I'm going to put cliffs in a lower layer below. Remember, your terrain items like your cliffs, your hills, those things are always going to be the base in which everything is built upon that. So push that down to like layer -10, far down, because you want everything else to be built on top of that. I also notice that this hill is facing the wrong way. If that ever happens, again, just flip vertically. Oopsie, that's the whole thing. I meant the stroke itself. There we go. Let me see. That looks correct. Okay, this looks perfect. All right, why don't we go ahead and go over our resources section again here. We had water, food, timber. Looks like our river. Check, we're done with that. Why don't we go into timber and let's go into stone, because those are natural resources. When we get to crops, foods, and fish, we'll add docks and things like that. So let's stick with the natural parts first. So let's go ahead and put down some trees. We'll go into the catalog, type in tree. Now, if you have a large forest and you don't want to click all these individual trees, I recommend these big tree clusters right here. These are perfect. Why don't we put a little forest just right here, kind of pushing itself out. Let's put a little bit right here in this corner as well. This forest right here is going to provide the necessary timber that's going to be needed for people to get the wood to build these half timber houses. So this is going to be super important that we have some kind of forest here to kind of allow access for lumber. So that's going to be important. So you don't have to make the forest huge. You just need to have enough there. Okay, so let's go ahead and just put some individual trees to kind of break it up. That way it doesn't look like it's just a big cluster without little trees, just stragglers hanging about. There we go. That looks good. We're also going to want to go back into our terrain right here. We're going to open this up. And what I might do is I want to create maybe remove some of the slope right here, so that way people can take their boat and then kind of climb up this little slope right here that go up onto this land right here. So we'll have to create some kind of, maybe a slope of some kind. We'll figure out how to do that in a moment. Let's just continue on with the resources. We've got trees. Let's create a rock quarry. Why don't we put up here some rocks up here on the terrain? Let's go back into terrain. Let's go ahead and open it up. Let's choose rocks in the catalog. I would first use some large rocks first. So maybe these are like protruding out of the ground, these rocks right here. And these, what will happen with these rocks is they can be broken down and then used to for quarry. So let's go ahead and take some smaller rocks like this, some smaller rocks. Perfect little rocks over here. Let's go use some extra smaller rocks here. Whenever you are making something like this terrain here, what I always do is I follow this method of largest rock or tree first, medium-sized rocks, and then small rocks. Okay, so this is going to create our little rock quarry right here. That's perfect. Now we have a rock quarry. We have some terrain here. All that stuff is good. So we have our resources available. Timber, water, rocks for our rock quarry. So that's going to work out well. Let's go ahead and blend. Let's do some texturing real quick. One way to show height is to use contrast, right? Why don't we take a darker variant of the grass texture, go over to land brush, and let's go ahead and paint the lower part a darker green color like this. In fact, why don't we take the same green color and just make it a little bit darker like this? And we'll, oopsie, it's a little too dark. Let's go ahead and change that setting here. Let's go with about 80. That should look good. And we'll go ahead and paint the lowest foundation or the lowest point of the ground a darker green. Like this. Already it causes that rocky outcropping to pop out because it's a lighter color. You notice that, right? So there's a good step. Let's also go ahead and paint in a deeper part here. That looks good. Why don't we bring the opacity down a little bit? And that way we can paint this section right here a little bit darker variation. There we go, like this. All right, let's take a step back and see how it's coming along. Great. So we're using contrast to create our sense of depth. That turned out, that's excellent. Okay, let's go ahead and make some minor changes to our river. You notice that the river is just these very flat, straight kind of lines, and rivers just wouldn't do that. So why don't we go back and just do some changes to the river to show that there's a little bit more going on. For instance, why don't we like break up some of this edge here like this, just to get rid of that straight kind of curve. Just bring the brush size down a little bit and just kind of break up little sections like this. And what this will do is it will remove that strange straightness that the lines happen. It probably wouldn't look like that, right? So why don't we just break up these edges like this? That looks good. Let's break up this edge just to kind of fix that problem. And then we'll go into mask effects and we'll play a little bit with mask effects. And then we'll add a couple things to the river to make it more interesting, because right now there's nothing in the water. There's no waterfalls, there's no log jams, there's no rock bars, there's no sandbars, right? And when you're trying to create a realistic terrain, you want to factor in the interesting environment that a river can create. There's all these interesting things that can take place: rock bars, sandbars, waterfalls. Now, I'm not going to add any waterfalls on this stretch because they had to travel on a boat. Our refugees had to travel on a boat. So if they ran into waterfalls, that might be a little hard on their boat. So we won't do that, but we can create river islands. We can create maybe some small waterfalls on the edges and things like that. And I'll show you a great trick on how to make waterfalls, because I know some people struggle with, well, how do I make a convincing waterfall? And the trick is actually much easier than you think. Let's start with a couple things first. Let's create a series of rock bars and sandbars. Let's just go ahead and use a sand texture. Why don't we also use a different brush? You'll notice that there's a lot of brushes that we have here now. And so you don't have to use your default brush right here. A great brush that I recommend everyone use, or two of them, is Dirt 1 or 2. These brushes are fabulous because they help to diffuse the line in which the brush creates. So this is kind of important. What I would do is I bring your opacity down a little bit. Make sure you're set to that land brush, and let's create a series of sandbars. And a sandbar and rock bars are great locations, especially a sandbar is a great location for a boat launch or for boats to dock or come into the shore. So why don't we create a sandbar right here at the bottom, right here like this. I'm just going to do several brush strokes to show that sandbar. And in fact, I might remove some of this stroke right here. I'll show you how to do that. We'll go over into terrain, open it up. We're going to click this hill. And the way that you can do this is go to the line tool, and right here there's something called portals. And if I click the line that I want or shape that I want, I can go ahead and create these, break this up right here. Let's go ahead and move it all the way this way and then move it a little bit this way. I think that looks good. And then right here is a nice little sandbar that we can create. So let's create a little sandbar here. Great. So this little sandbar right here is going to be perfect for where our refugees are going to land their boats, because it'll just go right into the sand and they can keep it there. So very helpful. There's our sandbar. I think one sandbar is enough. Why don't we create some rock bars? And to create a rock bar, I would recommend that we take some rocks. Let's go ahead and just use these ones here. And the way that I would start is to go ahead and place one right along the edge right here. And then place some smaller rocks along here. Another one here. There's our big ones. Let's go back to our medium rocks. So let's go ahead and place a medium one here. Don't forget to also place some in the water. This is where your waterfalls will come in. Let's take another larger rock and just place it like right here, just like that. Okay, so there's that one there. Let's go ahead and create a smaller rock and just kind of place it right here. And then let's go ahead and place some smaller rocks along this edge right here. There we go. So this is going to be a nice rock bar. Why don't we also go over to a couple things here? Why don't we choose rock texture, rock? Let's also choose a gray like texture to make the ground seem a little bit different. Let me just check to see if I can find a nice gray texture. Maybe even a dirt one might work well. What's this one right here? It's kind of a dwarven one here. Why don't we change the texture scale? That looks good. It's a little on the dark side. Why don't we tweak some things? Let's desaturate it, bring the brightness up a little bit. That looks good. And then I'll just go ahead and paint this along this edge right here. And we'll have a nice little rock bar right here. There's a little rock bar. Why don't we also look up alpha? There should be some rock alphas that we could use. Maybe this dark cobble. Let me take another one. Here we go. Let's try these desert stones right here. Let's desaturate. The size looks good. Let's go 100% opacity and just kind of paint in these rocks. There we go. Get some rocks there. We got a nice rock bar. That looks good. Okay. Let's go ahead and do the waterfall part. I don't care for the water parts in this watercolor cities. I don't really care for these waterfalls. They're a little on the cartoony side for me. You can use them. There's a lot of tweaking that you have to do to get them to work right. But what I find better to use personally is from the fantasy battle maps. There are these waterfalls right here. These are called waterfalls. Now, I don't care for the chalky line work. So what I'll end up doing is a simple tweak. All I'll end up doing is just bringing the contrast all the way down and then bringing the brightness up. And what I'm creating is the white water that a waterfall creates, right? And then all I have to do now is just put this a layer below these rocks like this. There's my waterfall, and I'll put a little rock just right here at the top, right here like this, just to break it up. And then now you have your nice waterfall. So the way that waterfalls work is you need to have two rocks on each side parallel to each other, and then you put a waterfall stamp in between them and down below, a layer below them. So this is how you kind of get your waterfalls together. And what we want to do is maybe create a series of them. And what's also really good is when you have rocks like this in the water, there's going to be things like log jams. So cool little trick. Why don't we add in some trees and logs? Go back to watercolor cities. Where are we at for time? Half hour. Perfect. Let's go to tree. I wonder if they have the lumber. There should be some trees, fallen tree logs. Perfect. These are going to work perfect. So what happens is there might be flooding, or people might live upstream somewhere doing some timber, and they're using the river for the logs to float. But what happens often is there might be things like runoff, like maybe it rained really hard in a season and trees were torn from the running water, and those logs and those branches and all of that goes into the water. And what happens is as it's traveling down the stream, it gets caught on the shore somewhere. It gets caught by a river rock like this. So maybe we want to consider putting a log right here. Let's put it up a layer so it's above. Let's go ahead and put another log maybe like this. And then maybe we can go ahead and put some smaller variations and maybe have them going along here like this. And then maybe some of them went down like this. And so we'll go ahead and use these smaller pieces right here just to kind of build it and bring it together. There's a good stop or part right there. So you would expect some debris to get caught in the rocks. Why don't we make a couple more of these and then we'll texture them in? So let's go ahead and create some waterfalls maybe along here as well. There's some rocks at the top here, so why don't we go ahead and put them here as well. Let's put some here. Maybe no need for a waterfall this time, so why don't we just put some rocks down like this. Some important things to mention, by the way, you can also take these rocks right here and use a object shadow. Let's go to custom object shadow and let's use white. And this can kind of represent the water interacting with the object itself. So right there, you would expect a little bit of white right there. So it's interacting with the water. We're going to do the same concept here. We're going to go to custom object and we're going to create a white object shadow to show that the water is interacting with the object as you would kind of expect it to do, right? So there you go. So we have that. This looks good. Why don't we also take that textures that we added here. Let's bring the opacity back down and just add a little rock bar here. And why don't we take that same texture and just kind of place it all along here as well, as you would kind of expect. It's a rock. This is kind of a rocky section. It's a rocky outcropping, so why don't we do that? Let's go back and take those regular rocks and add them in here. In fact, just to get the more contrast, why don't we bring the brightness back up? There we go. And we should be able to see those rocks a little bit better. There we go. That darker texture needs those lighter rock colors to make sure that those rocks really pop out. So we'll do the same thing here to get those rocks to pop out. There we go. Nice. Build the rocks, put the rocks all along here. Here's where our rocky outcropping is. Perfect. There we go. Our river is coming together. We'll do some texturing. Let's go ahead and continue adding more things along the shoreline. We're going to add, let's add a couple more rocks. Let's add some rock right here, right where the sandbar ends. And we'll create some rocks here. One right there looks good. Okay, and as always, use your medium-sized rocks. Let's go ahead and put the smaller one. We'll put the medium-sized one over here like that, and then take the smaller size rocks. Let's bring the size up a little bit. There we go. All along here as well. And you know what? It doesn't hurt to throw a little bit of rocks in the sandbar as well, just kind of here and there. Because, you know, things travel in a river. So not a bad idea to throw in just a couple rocks in the sandbar. And then we'll go ahead and do our painting as well. We'll take our, oopsie, we'll bring that opacity down, my mistake. Whenever you're blending textures, I always recommend about 30 to 40%. That's about the best blending opacity that I can think of. And then we'll go ahead and paint those rocks in there. There we go, looks good. Oopsie, I think we want the lighter one. Is this the right one? Yeah, it's the right one, okay. At 100%, there we go. That looks good, great. So things are coming together. Much of our terrain is coming together. We have our location. We're having a lot of the resources already. Let's continue adding in a couple more things. There's a lot of things going on a river bank, right? It's usually not just you know, this flat, nothing going on, a little bit of grass here. There's usually rock bars, sand bars. There's usually grass, ferns that are hanging out over the bank. All that kind of stuff happens. So let's go type in grass. I think I'm not seeing any grass stamps here to use. That's okay. There might be a texture that we can use for that. Let's go with grass. Oh, gas, and still spelled wrong. Here we go. Oh, you know, this looks good. I kind of like this grass patches right here. This looks really good. Our texture is quite bright. Let me just apply it real quick to see what it looks like when I apply it. Yeah, I think what we should do is make this a little bit darker. So why don't we bring the brightness down a little bit to create a sense of contrast. So why don't we paint some dark kind of grass patches here. That looks good. Let's put a little bit of grass along here. Put a little bit of grass along here. What we're trying to do is we're trying to blend in a little bit here. Let's create some grass along this bank here. That looks good. That looks good. A little bit of grass along this bank. And then we'll put some grass at the base as well along here. Let's go ahead and bring the scale up. Put some grass along here. That looks good along here. And then why don't we also put some grass along these edges here. That looks good. And then we're going to go ahead and throw in one of these simple grass textures right here. We'll apply this one. And let's go ahead and put some grass texture just to break up the flatness. You notice that it's kind of flat. So let's go ahead and just punch in these little bit of textures here just to kind of break up the flatness a little bit. So you'd see a little bit of grass there. Okay, I think overall this looks good. We're going to let it automatically save. And then now that we've done our most of our texture blending for our land, why don't we do some texturing for our water? So a couple techniques that I can show you that are really helpful. If you go to Inkarnate in the catalog, click that tag, and if you type in snow in the catalog like this, you're going to notice that there are these nice snow textures. Now, I recommend this one right here, the lighter one, instead of this harder one. and then hit snow, you're going to have to change the scale, of course. So let's change the scale, bring the opacity down. And my recommendation is that you bring the opacity down and you start with a couple places. First, we're going to start with the edge of the water. Notice that we've already used some mask effects already to create this white part. So why don't we take our pen and we're going to just apply a little bit of this white texture along our edges of our water to represent the edge or the banks interacting with the water itself. Just like we put those white object shadows on the objects, these right here is going to create this illusion that the water is interacting with the bank. And it's also going to create a sense of contrast because it's going to be this bright kind of white color along this edge here. Now, there are a couple locations that you want to have white water, okay? And that is going to be wherever your waterfalls are, you're going to expect that, right? So really paint in wherever your waterfalls are, wherever your rock bars are. Go ahead and paint in a lot of interacting with that bank there. Same thing here. Really lay it in here, this white water, to show that it's interacting with the water. Same thing here. This should have rocks, lots of white water interacting with it, okay? So it's going to be very helpful. So there's our first step, right? Now, if you want to show sections of the water that are deeper than others, you're going to use that simple contrast trick, right? If the water is deeper, it's darker. If the water is shallower, it's brighter. So if I go to Watercolor Cities and I take this dark water blue, and notice that I've already used it for this right here. So what I might want to consider doing is I'm going to go ahead and change my brush to cloudy. Okay, cloudy is going to be super important. All right, you want to use your cloudy brush for water. On top of that, we're going to go ahead and bring the brightness down a little bit so it can be dark, and we're going to bring the opacity down. I'll do a quick swipe just to see what it looks like. It's a little bit darker there. That's perfect. Hey, Fargrim the Barbarian, thank you for raiding with a party of 2. I see you and thank you. We appreciate you. Let's go ahead and paint in the darker parts. So maybe what I want to do is I want the water to be shallower where the sandbar is, and it gets darker the closer it gets to the rock bars. So I'll start painting in these sections here a little bit darker, like this. And in fact, why don't we bring our brush size way up so we can get it nice and big. There we go. Paint that in. First, here's our first layer. Notice that it gets a little bit darker. Let's make it a little bit darker the farther we go down. So it's darker here, darker, it's getting darker, therefore it's getting deeper, right? So the closer we get to those rock bars there, the deeper it kind of gets as it gets a little bit shallow here. Why don't we take that same water texture and just bring the brightness up a little bit to create the more shallower sections. So let's go ahead and paint a shallower, brighter color here just to show that the water is a little bit shallower. That's going to be helpful. Okay, that looks good. Now, one thing that we don't have quite yet is we haven't noted the idea of momentum. We don't know which way the river is floating outside of just the way that the rocks where this timber is right here. These, if the river was flowing this way, going from left to right, the logs would be on this side. If the water is going from right to left, then the logs will be on this side. And that's the only indication that we have so far to know which way the water is going. But there are other tricks that we can do to show river movement, and we can use the line tool and we can use waves for that. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go open up the catalog. I'm going to go to Inkarnate so that I have everything selected. Then I'll type in wave. There's going to be a bunch of waves that you can choose from. I recommend the Fantasy Battle Map wave called Pond Wave because they're smaller. And what I would do is you can use the pen like this, single click drag, and then you can create a curve like this. So let's go ahead and create a curve like this. You can do that, or you can draw it by hand using free draw. It's up to you. Let's go ahead and zoom out real quick. This way I can kind of see where things are going. And the way that I normally do waves is like this. I'll usually start in one direction and move my way. So I'll start here and just start creating these waves that go like this. And I'm making my way from right to left as I go in the direction that the river is going. And I'm just going to create a bunch of these. And this is what this will do, is it will help to denote this idea that there is flow, right? We want to have flow in our river. That's going to be so important. How do you do the pen curves versus straight lines? Pretty simple stuff. Go to your pen, click hold, then drag off in the direction you want, then let go, and then it will begin to create a curve. So that's generally how it works. Now, the trick to more curve is how the direction goes. So for starters, if I want to have less curve, then I would go in a straight, then I would go like this. I would go in a straight line this way. Notice that there's no curve. But the further I go up or down like this, the curve becomes more evident. So it's click, hold, and drag. Really trick. Hey, Fargrim, I'm glad that you enjoy using the tool. Awesome. So thank you again for rating. No problem, McAnders. I hope that's helpful. Yes, curves are very helpful, especially if you don't have a regular pen that you can use. So with the mouse, I recommend the click hold technique with the pen. Otherwise, free draw works great with like a stylus if you have one. And I will tell you that the stylus is only helpful with maybe like 10 or 11 functions in the tool. Most functions you can do in the tool can be done with a mouse. But when you're doing things like waves, making terrain with lines, I will say that having a stylus is helpful. If you're looking for one on a budget, I totally recommend a Huion. If you have a higher budget, I recommend Wacom, but that is entirely up to you. But yes, definitely Huion if you want to get a lower budget one, but it will help you in the long run with all kinds of niche things that you do on your map. Okay, all right, so I think much of the terrain is done. There's probably more that we could do here, like we could probably paint underneath the forest a little bit. Why don't we do that? Let's go ahead and paint a little bit of brown under the trees a little bit. We'll go back to our dirt brush real quick. We'll go back to land. I'm going to bring the opacity way down, and we'll just go ahead and paint a little bit of brown, because what we have is a lot of cool colors. Notice that we have blue and green. These are very cool colors, right? Very cool colors. But if we add in some browns for dirt, you're now adding in warmer colors, right? And what's also really nice is brown is a neutral color. So it doesn't matter what the other colors on the map are, they will work with it. And that's why you see dirt and grass and nature, those neutral colors, they look so good together. So just paint a little bit of brown underneath your trees here, just to create this sense of what's called duff. The falling of the trees, leaves fall down, then they turn brown from the lack of water, they die. So all of that dirt underneath is going to represent that dirt, whether it's dried out leaves or pine needles, whether it's the dirt itself, that's what that brown represents. And dirt is great. Again, it's a neutral color and it's a warm color. And remember, we talked about this ironclad rule of contrasts. Now you have this warm color brown and these cooler colors blue and green. So you can notice that when I take a step back, those brown warmer colors really contrast against those cooler colors. So very, very helpful. So I think much of the terrain is done, and we can kind of move on to our village part, which is going to be super important. And we're going to get to know some of the people in our families here so that we can kind of get an idea here. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and turn off terrain. I'm going to turn off land, and I'm going to turn off water for now. And we'll go ahead and close these up so you can kind of see the infrastructure here. But what we're going to work with here is when you're putting down your infrastructure, the buildings that are necessary, these are the 5 basic ones that I recommend. One, you're going to need farms, right? Whether it's irrigated from water from the river, or whether it's irrigated by rain that happens. You're going to need docks for fishing boats. So we have a fisherman here, this fisherman family that escaped. We're also going to need a mason. Someone's going to need to work the stone to make a mill. So we're going to have probably a couple windmills, one at the very least, to produce the grain to feed everyone in this hamlet/village. We're going to need a lumber yard and a carpenter who's going to make the furniture necessary, as well as someone who's going to create the planks to create the houses. And then finally, we'll create a kind of a small market to where all the families can come together and kind of share their food from the crops or from the fish that they got from the river. Because with such a small community like this, they can afford to share with everyone. So there's a spirit of cooperation, especially after going through such a terrible experience like being war refugees. They're going to want to work together to survive. And that's how it works, right? The lone wolf dies. If you want to survive, it requires collaboration. So the Cochrane family, the Siddell family, the Madras family, and the Lodfelt family are going to work together to create a thriving and stable community. And there's no way that that village could turn into a massive metropolis capital without the spirit of cooperation, without cooperation working together to create that. So now we have a general idea of the kind of buildings that we need here. So I'll go ahead and turn the village, this information off here. We'll turn off this infrastructure. We don't need this. So I'll turn that off, and we'll turn our terrain back on, and our land brush. Here's back to our terrain. Oopsie, I accidentally moved some stuff there. Let's go ahead and make sure that's locked. This looks good. So far, so good. All right, let's go ahead and place down our first buildings and create roads and things like that. And normally what I would do is I would create the main carriageway or main route, right? This is the main road in which people will travel from maybe the docks that will be down here and then move its way up to this rocky outcropping. So why don't we start with a dock first? That would be a good idea. Hey, first time chatter, glad that you're here. Let's go ahead and create a dock. That's going to be very, very helpful. And if you're struggling with scale, I'm going to use these rocks as a guide for my scale. And then I'll set that to that same size. So if I look on my terrain here, I click this rock, it says it's about 80. So what I'll do is I want to make sure that my stamps for this map are going to be ranging between about 70 to 80 or so. So we'll create a dock right here. There's step one. We'll create a little dock here. Let's go up to 80. There we go. Got a little dock right here. We might want to maybe take some rocks, because if it's in the sand, then it doesn't really have a foundation for the dock to sit upon. So why don't we just take some small rocks like this? We're going to randomly place them along here. We'll place a little bit in the water here. So now there's a little bit of a foundation for this dock. It's not built on sand. We'll go ahead and put those rocks all along that edge here. This is where it's going to start us out, right? This is where it starts. There's a dock. Perfect. Let's go ahead and create a road that's going to travel up this hill right here, up into this area right here. And the reason why the families decided this rocky outcropping was the best location is because it's got a higher vantage point, which is perfect for defenses. It's perfect for having a higher overview so that you can see the things around you. That sense of height is perfect. So, and that's how most people in history, most civilizations, where they built the locations was defensible locations. And up on a hill, a height, a rocky outcropping is a great location for that. So let's go ahead and choose, let's use a path to create the road. The road will change as we go. So that's why I'm going to use a path or a line instead of a texture, because it will change over time. So I'm going to go ahead and use free draw. I'm going to use my stylus pen, but you could also use your mouse. And I'm just going to create this route. It's going to go like this. And then what I'll do is I'll have it meander going up like this and then going to here. Now you don't have to have it there. There could be a second route that goes this way and then follows the terrain and then loops this way like that. So here's kind of our nice road system. And then along, this is our main road system. We'll have two, one that goes directly to the dock this way. And then we'll create another route that goes down this way where our crops will be. So crops will be there. This is where our fishing will be. And this is where our village will be. So now you have a very clear locations where these resources are going to be, right? So let's go ahead and, oopsie, I didn't mean to remove that. Let's go ahead and remove these. I'm going to go ahead and take this path right here. Let's go ahead and take our terrain and make sure that I lock all this stuff. I'm going to take everything in here and just lock it so I don't accidentally select it. Lock, there we go, perfect. And now I have these objects here. Let's go ahead and bring the opacity down. Let's bring the size up a little bit. Let's go ahead and turn off the shadow. That looks good. Okay. Once you've created the road, then we can start putting things along the road. Like, for instance, maybe there's like an old fishing shack where the refugees placed somewhere where they could dry the fish, or where they could go to grab supplies, oars, or whatever it might be. So why don't we create a shack? It might work as a temporary shelter as well for the time being. So why don't we build that? We're not going to build the shack on the sand. We're going to build it on the grassy part where at least there's some kind of foundation. So we'll put one shack there and maybe another one right here like this. And I'll bring it up to 80% so it's about the right size. So we've got some nice shacks there. We'll move our way as we're going up this way. Well, let's just go down this way. We'll start building in some farms. The way that I set up farms is really simple. First, you want to choose some houses for the farmhouse. Let's go ahead and use these yellow ones. We're going to need farmhouses, right? So why don't we create a farm right here at the base? Let's put another farmhouse right here. Let's put another farmhouse right here. Okay. Not sure what this white line is right here and how that got there, but we'll get to that in a moment. Okay. Go back to our village here. Oopsie, I realized I did not add these things to our village layer. If you make a mistake like that, don't worry. Just select all the items that you want to be in the village, select them all, and then go down to move layer and then move it to village. Now all of my stuff should be in the village right here. There's some other things that I also screwed up on too. For instance, in the terrain here, I kind of put those things there and I shouldn't have done that. Let me check this line right here. There it is right there. Let me go look up dock. Did I put it on the wrong layer? Of course I did. There it is right on terrain. Perfect. No problem. We'll copy. We'll just go ahead and move to layer village. There we go. Now everything should be up on the village layer. Perfect. Okay, some farmhouses. Now on top of farmhouses, you would also expect things like shacks, silos, something to hold the grain, something for tools, things like that. So let's go ahead and add a couple shacks and outbuildings right next to each one of our farmhouses. This is going to be helpful. There we go. That looks good. This looks good. Okay, that looks right. Then why don't we also create some offshoot routes that are going to go from the houses, and then that road will connect to each one of the crops. So I'll go back to my line here. I'll go ahead and use my free draw, and I'll have the route go from like right here going this way like this. Same thing here. I'll have the route go from here like this, and then this route will go from here to here like this. Perfect. And I'll go ahead and make sure that those lines are a layer below, while these houses should be up a layer. So I'll select every one of these shacks. In fact, what I'll end up doing, cool little trick, if you want to select all those objects, you can go like this and just go up a layer. There we go. Okay. For right now, I think 3 farms make sense because we only really have 11 inhabitants. What might happen throughout our story is that more refugees might come down the river and then continue to build the population outside of just reproduction, which you would kind of expect, right? So maybe some refugees more refugees will show up, and we'll add more housing as that come along. So why don't we add in some crops first? Let's go with crops. And my recommendation when doing crops is, if you have all crops be the exact same texture, it doesn't look dynamic and the immersion is off. What you should do is you should have one crop that's just been tilled, maybe another field that actually has food, another field that might have harvest wheat. And by having these varying textures and having like a half reaped crop, what that does is that creates this sense of immersion, that something has happened instead of just this flat crop texture. So what I should do is choose maybe a fertile, barren red thing, and I'll change that scale up. I'm going to rotate it. And the way that I choose my rotation is I just want it to line up with wherever the roads are. So I'll bring my opacity up, I'm going to go ahead and change to my regular default here. And what I'll end up doing is go make sure to go to land, and I'm just going to paint some crop right along here like this. So here's our first crop right here. Why don't we add in something with actual like planted? So why don't we change that scale down a little bit? Let's rotate it to fit alongside the roads here. I think that looks good. Let's go ahead and add that. So let's go ahead and paint this. There we go. That looks good. Got a nice crop there. And then let's also, let's use this darker one for the next one. Let's rotate it. Let's go ahead and put it this way along here like this. And we'll have another crop right here. And you don't need a whole lot. It's only 11 people for starters. But as our village grows into a large city, capital, all those things, those crops will expand, and we'll do a different, we will resize it, and we'll build those crops. And at one point, the village, the capital, the town will become so big that it will begin to rely on trade to get its food sources, because much of the landscape in this little area right here is going to be taken up by residential as it grows. So we'll expand, we'll make it bigger, and we'll build and build and build throughout future episodes. Where are we at for time? It's been 1 hour. We're going to go to the bitter end. We want to build the entire village before we quit. So let's keep going here. We've created the basics here. These farmhouses, so 3 families, or at least 3 people, different people are going to be living in these 3 houses here. Why don't we go up further and put some more houses up here? So why don't we go ahead and put some houses up here, put a couple here. We'll put them around this bend right here. And I think we'll have a nice little thing right here. So here are some houses. Now, when you're building infrastructure, like your mason or your carpenter, know that most professions, they lived in the same place that they worked. So if you go into the catalog here, and there's this really nice tag that you can type in, or you can type in the search field specialty, I believe it's called. Oh, no, it's not specialty. Where is it? Let me see if I can find it. So we'll scroll down. Maybe I spelled specialty wrong, but we'll go through here. Effects. Where is those? Those are going to be super important. Where are we? Modular buildings. We'll go into special. There it is. Special buildings. If you type in the catalog special, like this, and my recommendation is to show all the names, and you'll see you have things like carpenters right here, right? We're going to need that. There's also smiths. Smithies, we probably need that. And then we're also going to see if we can find a mason, and I don't see a stone. I see alchemist, inns, leatherworks. I think this smithy right here will work just fine. Oh, there it is, mason right there. That's perfect. So 2 things we're going to need: a carpenter, and you notice that that carpenter also has a house. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's put the carpenter right here so it fits just right into there. We'll bring it up a layer. That looks good. We're also going to want to have a mason as well. So let's put our stone mason together. Let's go put that one there. And then we're also going to want to, there's no need for an inn yet. We're just 11 people. So there's no need for things like that. You just want the basics. Let's also grab a fishery. Let's go ahead and place that fishery right here. Let's face a fishery just right here, right next to the dock. That's a good location. A brewery. No need for a brewery. Only 11 people. I don't throw in those specialty buildings normally until we get into the town part. You only need the bare basics for like a hamlet and a village. But you know what? As the village grows and more refugees come down the river, you're right. As it gets bigger, a brewery makes sense, right? And that means there's going to be more crops for hops or whatever it is. I think there's potato. There's all kinds of things that you can ferment for beer. It's not just hops, but there's a lot of different kinds. So we put in those basic infrastructure pieces. We're going to want to create a couple more houses like this. Let's go ahead and throw that in there. It's going to be a small village. We don't need to make it huge. In fact, what will start it out as a hamlet is a good start. All right, let's go ahead and place a couple more buildings along here. We also have those crops down there. Let's keep adding more houses. Let's go back into the specialty buildings. Fisheries, shipyards, smithies. Let's go ahead and throw in a smithy. I think that's going to be important. And let's go put them on the other side too. Right now, they're all in the same. A lot of folks did homebrews. I love to hear that. Heck yeah. Delish. Oh, yep, exactly. Hops, there's beer, honey, potato, all kinds of stuff. Exactly. Love it. Thank you for sharing all this information. I love when people share information in the chat. Don't be shy. Speak up. If you hear me say something incorrect, correct me. I don't mind. How will I learn? All right, let's go ahead and build these. When you're placing down your structures along the road, my recommendation is to be careful where the stairs are. See this right here? There's a stair right here. There's a stair right here. My recommendation is that you make sure that the stairs are facing towards the road, because you would expect the entrance to be facing the road. Otherwise, you'll have to create a separate road on the side that branches off and then connects to it. So just keep that in mind when you're doing the placement. Okay, just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to flip this one this way because I think it kind of works a little better that way. And then I'll put these together. This looks good. It looks good. Okay, once you've done the major, bigger buildings like this, we'll go ahead and place these together. Yeah, those are stairs. Make sure the stairs are facing the right way. Oh, this one is on this side. Why don't we kind of face it that way? The stairs are facing this way. Let's face them that way. That looks good. That looks good. That looks good. Okay. All right. On top of that, we're going to want to create some outbuildings, just like you had shacks and tool sheds and silos for your farms. You're going to need similar things for your village as well. So let's create some buildings. These could be outhouses, they could be sheds, whatever it might be, right? So let's just place a couple of these alongside each building like this. We want to have a couple of those. It's always nice to stack a couple side by side like this. It's okay if they're matching. There we go. Oh yeah, put the stonemason next to that. Great idea. Let's go ahead and put the stain. And instead of everything being close together, why don't we actually I've had everything kind of cramped together. Why don't we create a little bit more room between each thing? So what I'll do is I'll create some houses and buildings right next to the stonemason. And then right here where the blacksmith is, I'll create a couple buildings here. This way we can kind of take advantage of the land. It doesn't need to be cramped together. So we'll create some space. Let's go ahead and create our, that's the carpenter. Let's move the stonemason over to here. My mistake. And what we'll also do is we'll have it face kind of this way. So that way the road connects to here and then it leads over to the rock quarry. Let's also put in our carpenter or our blacksmith right here. I think that's a good choice. That looks good. Let's go ahead and put our carpenter right here. We'll put some buildings along here. I think this works a little bit better. The design probably works a little better this way. So it looks a little bit more interesting. Instead of having everything so clustered together, we're not a busy metropolis yet. So things don't have to be tight. They can be open, right? Let's also create a couple smaller houses, maybe right to the entrance right here. And let's create another smaller house right here, like that. And then what we might want to consider also doing is creating some smaller family crops, like maybe for lettuce or something like that. So let's create some smaller crop sections. So for these individual families, so there's these communal crops down here, and then these individual family farms. We'll go ahead and build those in as well. So why don't we do that? So I'll create some small little farm right here like this. I'll even bring the scale down a little bit. There we go. So we'll create a smaller little farm right here like this. Let's go ahead and maybe push it along here like this on the back side. That looks good. And then we'll go ahead and create another crop. Let's go ahead and change the rotation, change that scale a little bit. Let's put another crop maybe like right here along this route. I think that will look good. So let's go right here like this. Let's have it follow the road a little bit. That looks good. Right, you would have kitchen gardens, individual family gardens. It doesn't mean that other people couldn't use those gardens per se, but they're technically, I wouldn't say entirely private. But for the most part, I'd say, yeah, probably a little private. Might not be a bad idea to have some private farms or private little gardens there for people to eat if necessary. So we'll go ahead and put that one there. Let's go and put another one right here so it kind of looks like it's kind of connecting a little bit this way. So we'll fill that in and create that one there. Yeah, I love communal gardens. I mean, I think what's going to shape this community is their collective trauma that they've been through, right? They've just gone through this war-like scenario. They're probably not interested in trying to start conflicts and be selfish, right? They want to work together. They've been through a traumatic experience, and so they're probably not interested in fighting and bickering with each other. They're more focused on survival than they are on maybe talking about private property and what's most important and who owns this and who owns that. Perhaps those problems are what created the wars in the first place. And so what this village is focusing on is on cooperation. That's why it's so important that I'm adding that into the story itself. So I'm going to place some crops along here as well, like this. So we have some individual farms there. That looks good. All right, this looks good. Let's take a step back and just see how it looks so far. It's always nice to take a step back and just to see how things look. That looks good so far. I think it's coming along well. Let's go ahead and put some outbuildings along here as well, and then we can start putting together our road systems. And we don't need to add too much for a road system because it's just a small village. So we're only going to create the main road and maybe some sprawling dirt paths that kind of branch out from the main route. And what I'll also do is maybe just place some more outbuildings along the path here. Here, we're also going to create a market of some kind, so we'll have to figure that out. And in fact, I think the market might do better in here in this curve right here. So I think I'll change that up. And it's okay to change things. I actually think it's a good idea to change things up. So we'll put a market right there. I think that'll be a better idea. Let's go ahead and put that carpenter right here. Move this over here. This is where our market will be. That means where all the food and stuff that's made in these communal farms, all of that stuff will be brought up to this market. And what we'll do is we'll have a bartering system instead of using currency. It's just 11 people really that live here at the moment, maybe a little bit more than that as the refugees start coming in. So you don't need to have a massive sprawling market. The market is there just to barter. I will give you couple of my pigs for a couple of your corn or whatever it is you're growing, right? So that's going to be kind of important to throw that in there. All right, crops there, that looks good. Okay, let's keep adding a couple more things. Why don't we start painting in the actual road system? So what I'll do is I'll go in here, and the path can just be made of dirt or a whiter color. I generally recommend choosing a lighter color for your roads because the stamps, if you want the road to pop out, you use a brighter color so that it will pop out against the darker stamps, right? So what I'll do here is I'll go into my village section here, right here, and I'm going to take all of my lines. I believe maybe I put the lines on the terrain. I can't remember. Let's type in line real quick so I can find it. Nope. Oh, that explains it right there. There we go. I'm going to take all these lines right here, and I'm going to bring the opacity down, at least so I can see them for now. There we go. And then I'll take that white texture. I'll bring the opacity down. About 40 seems fine. I'll bring the brush stroke down a little bit. Let's go with about 8 here, and I'll just go ahead and fill in where those routes are. So just kind of paint in these roads. I recommend a yellow or a brighter kind of white-ish, off-white color is generally the best one. And for starters, I'm just going to use several strokes to give the road kind of this used look to it. And then when I go up this mountain, when I go up this hill right here, what I want to do is I want to create these switchbacks that are kind of going up like this. And if you can't see the path very well, this is what you can do to make this better. My recommendation is to take a line, choose clipping mask for your line. We're going to go up a couple layers here. We'll bring the opacity all the way up. And what I recommend doing is just following the path like this, follow the path like that. And then I recommend changing it to add a little blur in there. Got that blur. And then what that will do is that clipping mask will cover up the terrain elements underneath, and then you can paint in your road on top of those terrain elements. So kind of helpful that you kind of go about it this way, in my opinion. We'll bring it up a little bit. And now you've kind of created these switchbacks that go up this rocky outcropping. And we'll do the same thing here. Let's go ahead and create some switchbacks that kind of just make its way up like that. And then I can go ahead and take that texture and just kind of paint it and make my way in here like this. There we go. That looks good. All right, we'll go ahead and paint the road here like this and move our way. I always start with the main route first. I don't recommend making all the branches yet, because without the terrain or without the village already built, it's hard to know where the offshoots will go. So I always just generally do that second. I don't do it right off the bat. So, and I'll show you how I go about doing that in just a moment. We'll go back to our village and we'll go ahead and delete these lines. We no longer need them. You see how I painted in my road here? Perfect. Then we can create the offshoots. And the way that I create my offshoots is pretty simple. I'll have it go into right wherever the buildings are. So right here, notice how there's this interior, this part right here that goes to the stairs. Go ahead and build that road right along there. Same thing here, have it go into that building here. Same thing here. Let's go ahead and build a little route that goes that way. Let's also build our route that goes to the rock quarry as well. And then right in that open space, and then the little road that kind of leads to the rock quarry into here as well. That looks good. Okay, like that. That looks good. This looks good. And then I'll also create some routes that go in through here around this part. We'll increase our route that goes through here, here, here. And just kind of wherever people are kind of walking, you'll kind of create these little routes that kind of go around like that. Okay? What's also very, very helpful is to line your crops and your roads. It actually helps to frame the roads. It helps to frame the crops. Simple trick. My recommendation is just to use these bushes, or you can use a stroke. We can do both. Here, let's type in bush. Take these bushes here. I'm going to bring the scale down a little bit like this. And my recommendation when you put these down is don't go in a straight line like this. You see how they're all evenly spaced out from each other? Instead, single click like this, just to create some variety, some space in between each cluster, like this. And then you'll notice when I step back how that crop is now framed by those bushes. Okay, so kind of helpful to frame your crops like this. You can use fences too if you want. If you don't want to use, there's a lot of different things that you can do. If there's wildlife like deer and they're stealing the food, then you might want to create fences. If we go to catalog here, there should be a fence right here. You'll notice that there's these fence right here and this fence right here. You can fence it in. Just take the line like this, go around. I'm using between 70 and 80 as a guide. That is how I know my scale. For now, most of the stamps are in between 70 and 80, and I just remember that. If you don't remember, if you have a hard time remembering the scale that your stamps are at, select a stamp to see what scale it is, or write it down somewhere on the map. That's what I would recommend. It will be much easier for you. So see how I go about 70 here, just to get that scale right. So you can do that as well. You can use a fence. You can also use a hedge as well. Let's go to Watercolor Cities. There should also be like this hedge right here. So if you want to use a hedge instead, you can use hedges. It's whichever one you want to use. I'm going to use bushes because I just think bushes look nice and it gives it a more natural look to it instead of one solid line. So I'll just go ahead and take these and just go around the crops here like this. Kind of helpful. That looks good. And then what I'll also do is maybe line some of the roads with it. And what I'll do is just not too much, just a little bit here and there. 1, 2, just like that. Just so that my road has some framing to it, right? Same thing here. I'll create some framing along here as well, just to frame the road. Very, very helpful. Frame that road. Same thing here. We'll go ahead and frame some of these crops here like this. That looks good. Helpful. Hope that answered your question, Jonas Blue. Remembering scale is just about really the first stamp that you place. And that will kind of determine the scale. And it really quite varies because some stamps are a little bit bigger. Like some of those rocks can be kind of bigger. And so you'll probably change the scale varying on what stamp it is. But it's good to have a guideline like 70 to 80 is where I started. And then, of course, as you start to it gets bigger, like your village turns into a town, you'll have to change the scale again to make the stamps even smaller, because the more and more that you make a bigger settlement, it means dropping the scale of the stamps. But because we're making a small village, we can stick within a relatively larger stamp size, because again, just a village, it's not something massive like a city. So it's kind of a good place to start there. Why don't we also we've got crops for this area right here. We've got crops for this one. Why don't we create a little family crop or family garden for this area, and then a family garden for this area right here. That way we can kind of get both in there. I want to have both. I think that should work out well. Let's go ahead and change our rotation here. And I'll go ahead and just paint in another crop right here like this. That looks good. And then we'll put another crop over here. Rotation, we'll put it right here like this. There we go. In fact, we'll put it on the other side. Let's put it on the other side. We're going to undo all this stuff. Oopsie. Let's go back into history and then we'll undo it. Oop. One more. Close. There we go. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and paint a crop right here as well. Let me know, Jonas Blue, in the chat if I answered your question, okay? All right, that crop looks good. Let's go ahead and add in those bushes like we did before. Notice how the bushes are at 30, they're not at 70. Sometimes you do have to make some changes to things. So it's just a rough guide. I don't recommend changing the scale sizes too drastically, okay? Let's do that one. Let's do this one. Like this, we're getting close. Let's go ahead and take a step back and see what we've created so far. Overall, the village is coming together. I think we have our basic infrastructure. We have things like right here, this is our blacksmith. That's going to be necessary, especially if you're doing these larger crops like this. We're going to need to create the tools that are necessary for a crop, right? Whether it's going to be a scythe for cutting the crop, whether it's going to be something to till, tools for tilling the land. So you're going to have a blacksmith. You're going to need a stonesmith. And we're also going to create a windmill as well. That's going to be important. And in fact, we might want to consider creating we're going to create a windmill and then a market. And I think that we'll call it good. So let's go ahead and choose windmill. Let's go ahead and use red. I like the red color. That will have to go back up to 70 or 80. And then let's also choose our market stamps as well. There we go. Okay, I think market stalls. Nothing too colorful is necessary. So we'll do fine. Yes, you can just resize the map. Absolutely. I only meant, when I say scale, it depends on the individual stamp. You'll have to change the scale depending on what the stamp is. It's just how it works. Let's go ahead and create a little bit of a market right here like this. Kind of place these together. We don't need to have a whole lot. And then I'll go ahead and paint in a little bit of a part right here, and then maybe a little bit of road that kind of leads to it. Road here kind of leads to it. There we go, leads to it that way and there. That looks good. That looks good. I like that. And then why don't we also put some shacks and stuff just lining that crop there. So maybe this is like storage and supplies. Put them on here like that. That looks good. We'll go ahead and paint a little bit of dot there. That looks good. And then we'll also take our bushes and then we'll line them like this around here. This looks good. I'm going to put a lot right here just so that we can show this some nice greenery along here. That looks good. And then we'll also create our windmill. And right now we only need one. There's only 11 people, so we probably don't need a whole lot. And the best place to place a windmill is going to be right over here by this ledge where you can get the most wind. It's high up, so it'll catch the wind, and it's right along this river. And you notice that there's a slope here, so if wind travels along this river right here, let's say the wind blows in this direction going from right to left, then we can take our windmill and just place it right here like this, facing towards the direction of the wind. And then we'll go ahead and create a couple things there. We want to create maybe a little house that'll be next to it. That'll be a good start. So maybe a house. Let's go ahead and choose maybe a little house right here. Let's go ahead and place it right there. And then let's also create just a couple shacks and buildings along here like this. And then why don't we also create a little bit of a crop as well here somewhere. Let's go ahead and change our rotation. We'll change our scale size a little bit. We'll add a crop there. Let's put it right here like this. There we go. That looks good. We'll line it. Like this. Oopsie, let's go up a little bit. I went a little scale too small. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I would love to see a technology shift. As trade, commerce happens, new technology is introduced. As this village grows and it becomes a town, it will begin to get involved in trade. And when people begin to trade and communicate with each other, new technologies get developed and introduced. And so that's very helpful. And when we move into our town section in the series, we'll go over that. We'll have more refugees showed up, more people are going to show up to this village. They're going to say, hey, this is a great place. You've got a lot of utility here. It's a great location. And we'll maybe have technology shifts throughout each episode. So we can, like McAnder said, we can add in a water mill. We can add in, maybe create our own custom windmills that'll be more unique than the windmills that you see here. I'll show you how to make custom buildings maybe in the next episode. You can make some fancy windmills where the windmill propeller, the fan thing, is actually at the top instead of on the side. So we can kind of come up with some interesting tech throughout the episodes that we can kind of build upon. And then finally, we're going to want to connect, of course, that road. And what we should do is connect it right here like this, and then make its way like this right here. Let's go ahead and create an open space right here. This looks good. And then we'll put a little route that goes at the front here like this, and then create a little space right here, along here. And then why don't we have the route go around the crop like this? That makes sense. That looks good. Why don't we do the same thing here? Let's go ahead and create a little route that goes around the crops. Would kind of make sense, right? You want to have a little route that goes around. There we go. Let's connect that. Let's add a couple more. Add a little route that connects to here. Have a little route that connects to here like this. Same thing here. We'll create a little route that goes around the crop. There we go. That looks good. Let's go ahead and take a step back and see where we're at. This looks good. Why don't we finish adding in a little bit more crop, a little bit more roads right here. Let's put a road here. Have a road that goes this way all the way around. Connect this one. Another road that connects here. And then another road that connects here. And then why don't we have it kind of loop a little bit this way that connects there. That looks good. Okay. All right, let's take a step back and look at it. So far, so good. I think some other things we might want to add to our village is you probably would have just a couple trees in that area. So why don't we throw in just a couple trees to add a sense of height to the map? Why don't we take these trees right here? We're going to go up a layer. And then why don't we place some trees? And these trees might be apple trees, pear trees, hazelnuts, might be a whole bunch of different type of trees, right? So why don't we throw in a couple trees, a little more vegetation, and they're nice and dark, so they'll contrast against that lighter green there. So we'll throw in some trees here. That looks good. Whatever you do, don't put trees in front of your windmill blade here. So let's just put a little gaggle of trees here. Let's put some here, maybe a couple along the crops, along here, maybe a tree in this little triangle section, a tree along here. Let's take a step back and look at it. This looks good. So the start of our village is really, really coming together. There's a lot going on here. We've got our rock quarry, farms, all the necessary infrastructure is here. Fish for fishing, a fishery. Everything is necessary for this village to thrive, survive, and get larger. So I think that is it for this episode. It really, really came together, but there's a whole lot going on here with the village. And in the next episode, our village will turn into a town, and more of this rocky outcropping, this negative space, is going to fill out. See all this negative space? The town will grow. And then eventually it will take up the entire rocky outcropping, and then this forest will have to be cut to make way for more residential as it grows into a city and then grows into a capital, right? It's going to grow. It needs more space for it to grow. And we might have to resize the map and maybe build more terrain and everything as we go further out from the river.